that's what brought me to eagles was, okay, I need something that's better suited to handle jackrabbits on a day in, day out basis. And really that a male golden eagle is my opinion, is the best birds hands down in North America. I mean, you don't need to assist them in any way, shape, or form. When they get a hold of a rabbit, that's it. It's done.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another week of the Falconry Told podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Marshall Radio Telemetry, the crafters of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking systems available. For more information on Marshall Radio products, head to marshallradio.com. So our guest this week, Chase Dellis, is one of the Falconers I got to sit down with and get to know some last month at the NAFA meet. And it was cool getting to talk to Chase, not just because I don't get to talk to eagle falconers very much, but it was also cool getting to see his eagles, by the way, beautiful birds. But it was also cool getting to know him some because he kind of shed a little different light on different perspectives on what gets people into certain birds and falconry in general. And it was cool getting to hear his perspective on what got him into eagle falconry in particular, which you guys will get to hear shortly. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy. Three, two, and one. This is my first time getting to meet Chase Dellis from from Texas, correct?
I am from Texas now.
Yeah.
Originally Minnesota, born, bred, lived there my whole life. Got sick of the cold and snow.
Well,
so.
I can't imagine why you would have, living in basically the subarctic up in Minnesota, man. It gets brutal up there.
It is, yeah. And I'm much happier with Texas. I enjoy the game down there, the weather, the people. So I visit Minnesota, but you couldn't get me to move back.
I probably wouldn't either. I mean, Southern Indiana is more than enough for me sometimes. It's not even so much it's not like we ever really get, extreme cold like say Minnesota or parts of Wisconsin or anything does, but just the overall, I don't know, the schizophrenic nature of Southern Indiana, Midwest weather in and of itself, where it could be, 60 one day and then 2 degrees and snowing the next. It's ridiculous. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm done with those times in Minnesota and having 20 inches of snow in April. Where I'm at in Texas doesn't ever get colder than about 10 degrees Fahrenheit for a nighttime low, but always above freezing the next day. So much more beneficial for what I do and some of the exotic species I work with as well.
Gotcha. Well, does it get super humid down there during the summers?
We're right on the edge. They consider Abilene, Texas, where I live these days, as the start of West Texas.
Okay.
So we do get some humidity, but not as humid as it was in Minnesota. We do get more heat. We'll run 100 degrees, pretty standard during summertime. Generally doesn't get crazy. It doesn't get above 100, 105 very often, but it stays warmer in the winter and overall less humidity than I would have in Minnesota even.
Cool. So I mean, growing up in Minnesota, then with it getting so cold at times and just everything else, did you? How did you start off getting into all the hunting and stuff? I mean, did you ever get into the fishing stuff, like the ice fishing type of stuff up there too? Or
I never got into the ice fishing, to answer that. I found that sitting over a little hole staring at it for 12 hours in the ice to be extremely boring.
But if you got beer with you in a shack, though, I mean,
that is the key. See, I think that is the keys for ice fishing. They don't really care about catching fish. They just want an excuse to drink beer on the lake and get out of the house.
Yeah.
But I did not get into that. I actually been more traditionally pulled into hunting more than fishing. I did fish when I was growing up in trout streams, but I haven't picked up a pole in quite a few years. So hunting's been my big draw up there. Everything, small game, big game, bow, rifle. Pretty much if it's got a season and I can legally pursue it, I will give it a whirl.
Cool. Well, I mean, was it something that your dad or a family member or something started you out with, as far as just kind of getting interested in it, or
that extended family? So
okay.
My mother and father, neither of them hunt or have any interest. My mom, my dad were divorced when I was young, so neither side of my family hunted, but I did have aunts and uncles in South Dakota that were big pheasant hunters.
Oh, okay.
So when I would go out there for Thanksgiving, I would see them hunt. I always wanted to hunt with them. So I kind of got the bug myself when I was younger, and I went through gun safety training, or hunter education, I believe it's called, when I was 12 years old. Got my certificate and just started hunting, and I would get family friends, if I could prod them enough to take me out squirrel hunting. So my family supported what I did, but they were never leading me. I've never hunted with my mom or my dad. So it was kind of something I had to develop on my own, but they were supportive of what I did.
Yeah, my poor dad, I guess I should never say the words poor dad. Sorry, Dad, love you. But anyway, he tried whenever I was very young to take me hunting a couple times, squirrel, rabbit, whatever, to kind of get me interested, and that attempt failed. I bombed miserably, and after that I was just done for years. I had no interest, and it's kind of funny because like all my friends that I hunt with in falconry, they expected me just to bomb miserably with it because I didn't have a hunting background or anything when I got into it. So it's always interesting talking to falconers to see if they had a hunting background to start with or if they didn't, because it's the one thing that I've noticed that for whatever reason, and you wouldn't expect it, but people with all kinds of backgrounds are able to still somehow be successful doing it with just different kinds of birds and everything else. So it's like, so I mean, growing up, what was your favorite game to hunt then?
That's a good question. I mean, I kind of all was the same to me. When I could chase squirrels, I would chase squirrels. Where I grew up, I moved from my high school years to a very small town in southeastern Minnesota, so we could get our bicycles before we had our driver's licenses, bungee cord guns to the front of the bicycles, and just ride out of town. and we'd go hunt squirrels in the woods around town. So I did a lot of squirrel hunting, turkey hunting, deer hunting. I would say for Minnesota hunting, for me, turkey hunting is probably my favorite. I still love to spring turkey hunt, and that would be, if I had to pick between the three, that would be it for me.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's cool. I'm getting this visual of all these kids strapping bungee 22s to their bikes, just riding out to a woods and stuff.
We would do that, yeah, and that was pretty normal in a small town, 850 people. Nobody thought really anything of it down there.
Well, a different era too.
That is true.
Times are much different.
Yeah.
You see that nowadays, and Lord knows what the response would be for that. You'd have, I don't even know how many irate adults, just calling, just trying to get these kids.
Yeah, no, it is very, very different, and we were pretty well in touch with the outdoors through a lot of different activities back then.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, so how was the transition from all of that then? How did the falconry bug bite you, so to speak?
So I grew up actually. So animals have been I was born into the animal industry. So my father and mother started the oldest retail reptile specialty pet shop in the United States.
Huh.
So I grew up from the time I came out chewing on snakes, chasing tortoises around the house, all kinds of stuff. I was breeding king snakes by the time I was 5 years old. So reptiles were really my first thing before falconry. But the reason I bring that up is that's what got me into falconry. We worked at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, the Minnesota Herpetological Society. We'd bring animals out there on hands-on. Well, animal people generally work with animal people, and there was a falconer show out there, which is Last Chance Forever. John Carger runs it, and it's based out of San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
So as a little kid, being out there with my dad doing the reptile thing, we would interact with the falconer. We'd all hang out, have dinners. So I just got a fascination with the birds, and I was about 8 years old at the time, and I started working for his show out there, helping out, doing all the little stuff, cleaning gloves, cutting up tidbits, polishing props, things like that. Not a lot of bird contact, to begin with.
Right.
Which
I'm 8 years old. I mean, it's yeah.
And then as I, kind of proved that it was less than a passing fascination, I started to get more bird contact. So, fly a Harris hawk to the glove during the show, things like that. So I developed a fascination for raptors, and not so much the raptor specifically, but the interaction of them as a working unit and being able to hunt with them kind of fascinated me.
Right.
So I built on that and I started handling it at 8, and that's kind of what got me into it. But Minnesota at that time, the legal license age was 15 years old. So it was a long wait to get to actually being able to do anything practicing falconry.
Right. Well, I mean, at least though with you getting fascinated that young, and if you got in with the right people at that young age, at least that gave you more of an opportunity to have that much more of a solid foundation going into whenever you did hit those teenage years, whenever you were, you know, eligible though. I mean, there's so many people that are getting into this sport now that are of all ages, you know, I mean, even 40s, 50s and stuff. And I mean, I was about 30, 31. I'm 36 now. So, I mean, I haven't been doing it for a super long time myself, but I kind of, you know, even still being relatively young, you know, envy a lot of the guys that were like yourself that got into it at such a young age, because, you know, I wouldn't have had any inkling that it even existed except for watching like Lady Hawk and other movies. So it's like it's I don't necessarily feel like I have all this lost time or anything, but I also almost, like I've told some of my buddies this, that it would be hard for me to be able to get into it at an even older age, like 45, 50, where I feel like I would have missed out on so much already. And you know, plus you're starting to get the physical wear and tear aspect of things. And, you know, I couldn't imagine, you know, being in your like mid to late 50s or something like that, wanting to get into this and like having to go out and work and beat brush for the first time, like, you know, having all that, you know, it would be that much harder, I would think.
It would. I think the biggest thing is when you're a kid, you don't have a life per se. I mean, you might play sports, you might have a part-time job, but your life is very fluid. You don't have children to take care of. You're not worried about going through college. As a young working age, you know, adult, there's a lot more obstacles, you know, kids and careers, and a lot more demands of your time. So people who do get in that middle age bracket, you know, like you did, a lot of times it's tough. So, you know, kudos for sticking with it, you know, even though you have a lot of other demands on your time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I still try my best to make time, and, you know, I work night shift. So, you know, if I dedicate any extra time towards falconry or anything else, it usually comes at the cost of sleep. So living in a basic constant state of sleep deprivation, I'm sure isn't doing myself any favors, but it is what it is. I can't think of right now in my life knowing, like, having it any other way. But yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate the kudos. I guess kudos back for maintaining the interest at such a young age, because I mean, you're all over the place as a kid. You know, I mean, I can think there was about 3 or 4 different professions I wanted to be, and I mean, it's pretty normal. I started off wanting to be a vet, and I wanted to be like a marine biologist, and I wanted to be, you know, I mean, hearing an 8-year-old, like someone that was an 8-year-old and still, like, over the span of all of those hormonal teenage years and everything else, still maintaining the interest in this and making it happen for themselves, is kind of it's kind of impressive, really, because most kids, like you said, they just drop it, you know, and kudos for the people around you too for making you earn it, you know.
Well, for putting up with it, you know, and my obsession, I guess, with hunting overall, but falconry has been my biggest form of hunting over all of the years. So yeah. Did
you do any other associated stuff with any bird shows or Renaissance during those teenage years or anything? Or
so every fall I would work at the Minnesota Renaissance Fair, which was a 7 weekends. So Last Chance Forever would come up and they would run the Falconer show for 7 weekends. So I would spend every year from the time I was 8 through the time I was 12 working 7 weekends, handling birds, working with the show. When I was 12, I actually flew to San Antonio, Texas, and stayed with John Carger for an entire summer at his facility, and he rehabbed somewhere, I don't know what the number is these days. Back then I think it was 500 to 600 birds a year. So I spent my entire summer break as a 12-year-old running around down there in San Antonio, Texas, learning more about the birds and care, and then traveled back up when the fair started. So I did fair that way. I did a lot of years running shows out there, more reptile related things. I never did a bird show or anything with any Renaissance fair. Not because I have anything against it. I think that they do wonderful shows. A lot of them put on great shows. I just didn't have the interest of having to perform, on demand in front of, thousands and thousands of people in really rough settings. I'd rather just do the reptile thing and enjoy flying my birds in my own setting.
Well, I can only imagine having to go out and do some of those types of shows, and that just scorching heat, and in managing birds in that setting too. I mean, it's hard enough getting a bird to be motivated to want to fly and hunt and do whatever you want it to do sometimes in 60-degree weather, let alone 90 to 100-degree weather and stuff. So
it's definitely difficult, and you've got 1,000,001 distractions, tons of people everywhere. And as we all know, flying birds, you can't control what they're going to do. So
and especially when there's a ton of people around and everything else. And,
I've dealt with enough with that through abatement in different settings that the last thing I want to do is have to try to do something in that form of a setting. So
gotcha, yeah. So I mean, so you transition from that, and then you go. At what point then did you start your apprenticeship then, whenever you were able to, like that first eligible year? Or?
I did, yeah. So 15, I took the written test in Minnesota. I built my facilities, passed everything, got my sponsor. So got my apprentice permit, was able to trap a bird at that time. I couldn't drive yet, so I was driving back roads, I guess technically illegally, without a driver's license, trapping red tails that fall when I was 15. But yeah, it was just a countdown until when I could legally apply and do it. And I got licensed when I was 15 and have been flying birds ever since. General type things, flying red tails. I spent a lot of time flying red tails when I was younger, and then kind of transitioned to some of the other species as time allowed.
Right. And you didn't really do a whole lot of like post high school education types of like college or anything, or did you? Or
I did not particularly. So the big thing for me is, I'll be honest, there was nothing in college that seemed like something I wanted to do for the rest of my days.
Right.
There was no, I did look into big game guide school, but I decided that I'd rather be the one out there hunting for myself rather than everybody else.
That's like I said, that's a whole other realm of stuff that I still know relatively nothing about. So that's big game guide. That's a thing, a school for that.
They do have courses. It's not like a typical university school. It's like
like a trade or like just like a specialty course program type thing. Yeah,
it's usually based out of Montana, Wyoming, where it's more of an apprenticeship, I guess. I would say, where you work with with outfitters who are already guiding clients, and then if you make it through everything, they basically recommend you to another guide service, and you can get a job in your profession guiding hunters, putting them on game. So that was about the only thing that sounded interesting to me. None of the other regular, traditional, normal career fields seemed like a good fit, something I wanted to go to school for. So I did. I worked for a couple years. I did go to school. I decided I wanted to go to school to be a paralegal. I've always been really interested in law, but I know I do not have what it takes to spend 7 years in school to become a lawyer. I knew that going into it. So I said, well, what's the closest I can get to that? And I looked into paralegal. I did go to school for that for a year, but I decided not to continue pursuing it after a year, which at the time didn't seem like a great choice, but it's probably one of the better choices I've ever made. Is because I feel like had I graduated and gone down that career path, my life would be very different, and I'd probably be locked into that profession instead of pursuing other professions and other opportunities, which have allowed me to do the things I really enjoy doing.
It's having done basically that very thing, it's hard to, and I don't regret any decision I personally made either, but you can't ever help but wonder, have you just not just taken that extra little bit of risk and not really worried about starving so much and all the other stuff, if in the short term at the time you wouldn't have ended up a lot more miserable, but in the long term, like a lot more happy, so.
Yes, a little sacrifice sometimes up front can pay dividends. It doesn't always work that way, but if you take the risk, there are some opportunities for some rewards. So
right.
I'm in the same boat. I can't complain. I'm pretty happy with the choices I made and the way they worked out. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's ultimately it's whatever you want to do. If even if what you end up with initially isn't exactly what you want, even if it's something that you don't just wholeheartedly love, it doesn't mean you still can't be good at it and still have a lot of other things on the side that you do enjoy doing too.
Yes.
So you said you started flying pretty much red tails primarily, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Minnesota's pretty much red tails and goshawks are the best suited birds in Minnesota. So I focused on red tails, mainly, especially when you're younger, when you're a younger person in school or just getting kind of on your feet.
The most flexible bird for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're really forgiving. They allow you to hawk rabbits in a lot of locations, so you don't have to drive as far. It saves you a little bit of money. You can go trap a bird rather than buying a bird. And they're very forgiving, as you said, just birds in general.
Yeah, very hardy, and they don't require and don't want a lot of extra attention and otherwise whenever you don't have time to mess with them. So yeah, for especially for a young person that's on the move and got a lot of stuff going on and aside from the fact they still don't really know what they want to do, is probably the best bird for them.
Yes, I would agree with you 100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing, like I said, they always say, and there's a lot of truth to the fact, almost 100% truth to the fact that, I mean, whatever game you have is, and whatever bird is best suited for the game is what you should do. And so, yeah, no, I mean, it kind of sounds like, the area that you kind of grew up in is similar to where I'm at in Indiana, where, there's a lot of goshawks, a lot of, red tails and Harris hawks and stuff. And, here I am trying to learn how to fly a long wing, and it's just it's whatever, but we all just want to try different things no matter what at times, and so I mean I'm a big fan of did you ever do any of the micros also? Did you ever fly Kestrels or Sharpies or anything?
I did once. I flew a musket European sparrowhawk.
Okay.
Which is a European version of a Sharpie.
Right. It's random though. I mean for where you were at the time, I'm sure, but
yeah, well, the reasoning was it's an exotic.
Right.
So you don't need to put it on falconry permit, and I think at that point in my falconry career I was a general. I had a female ferruginous hawk that I was flying, and I had a female red tail. And you could only have 2 birds on a general license at that time.
Okay, instead of 3, kind of how it is most states now.
Yes, okay. Yeah. So, and I wanted to try flying a micro bird. So I imprinted that bird and flew it on sparrows and starlings, so stuff that was non-native.
So that are still everywhere.
Yeah, so you could do that. So I did fly one micro. I don't know that I will ever fly another micro in the rest of my life.
Well, I mean, imagine that coming from the Eagle guy. I mean,
that is true, and part of that is because some people absolutely love taking care of birds. They love handling them. They love feeding them. They love taking care of them. I don't really feel that way most of the time. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Picking up a bird and feeding it on a glove is a chore for me. Like, it's something I would rather not do if I don't have to do it.
Right.
And micros are so unforgiving. You have to be on top of your game, weighing 2-3 times a day, making sure that the weight is just absolutely perfect.
Depending on the species and depending on the type of food that you're giving them also, and everything else. There's the predictability factor can fluctuate amazingly between different birds plus the different types of food that you're feeding them too. For sure.
Well, even just keeping them alive. Like if I skip weighing an eagle or a red tail or something, for a day, it's not going to die on me. Yeah. And, the micros just require a lot more attention. So I think they're amazing birds. I love watching the little birds fly, but I don't know that I have what it takes to fly a little bird anymore.
Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is actually part of the reasons that you just gave or part of the reasons why, I mean, like the justification in not liking them so much is part of the reason why I like flying, you know, at least part, I should say, the reason why I like flying Kestrels is because once you get past that initial aspect of things, you know, and they just kind of become, you know, a little bit like house furniture and everything, you don't, as long as you have their metabolic rate down and, you know, you can, you know, hunt them and feed them that specific amount of weight food and stuff each time, you almost kind of don't have to deal with them much either once they're man down and everything.
I'm learning something new because
you know, I mean, and there probably would be people that would want to argue that and have their own different, you know, opinions on that and stuff too, but you know, like especially if you're feeding like rich red meat like sparrows and starlings and stuff with Kestrels, I know like both the females that I flew, their metabolic rates on, you know, once I got them used to pretty much eating that same like starling or whatever, like food source, you know, both of them, their metabolic rates were almost identical. Like it was an average of 0.4 grams like per hour. And all you really had to do is the basic math, you know, and just weigh that little ball of food. Like you could almost maintain like a female Kestrel on any like 9-10 grams of like starling breast meat like each day almost, and you just weigh it, give it to them, and then magically they're on weight again the next morning, you know. But don't get me wrong, they're not for, in my opinion, they're not for like beginners unless you got strict guidance, and it takes a minute to figure that out, you know. And if you don't have somebody there initially showing you the little tricks of the weight management stuff and everything, I agree with you. You can easily make a micro a lot more high maintenance, you know, than you know they potentially need to be. So, but you know, so I mean, they're definitely, I agree with you, they're definitely not for everybody. Kestrel still honestly is one of my favorite birds still, even, but they're, you know, I've flown Sharpies too, and a few of them, and yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see the contrast between how some of these smaller birds are so different. And I'm sure you've probably seen, you know, Sharpies, you know, like how do you think the you know, like the flying style and the maintenance and just the variability between, say, Sharpies and the Sparrowhawk, you know, were different?
That, I don't know that I can even answer that question because it's been a very long time since I flew.
Didn't have enough of a sample size and seeing, you know, dealing with all the Sharpies and everything else too. And
I haven't seen a lot of Sharpies flown. It's not real common in Minnesota. I only knew of a couple people that had passage Sharpies.
Oh, okay.
And really imprint Sharpies, I knew of nobody who's doing them in Minnesota, at least until the last few years. I think somebody's experimented with it, but I don't have enough, honestly, background to be able to tell you how they compare between the North American model versus the European model. Okay. I would assume fairly similar, but I would be remiss to answer that with any type of knowledge.
It'd probably, it'd kind of probably be like asking me questions about eagles.
That could be the case.
My eagle experience is like nil.
That's definitely more my strong suit versus the micro. So yeah, I can say that.
Well, I got you. Well, I mean, so after you did your apprenticeship and you flew these different types of birds through your through your general years and everything else, I mean, how long did it take you to start getting involved in the eagles?
So kind of going back my eagle history, I got licensed in 1999, and 2004 was the first year, was the first ever eagle meet in the United States, the Gathering of Eagles, and I attended that in 2004. So I had a lot of interest in eagles at that point, and honestly, I wasn't really that interested in eagles throughout my falconry career, but what got me interested in eagles was jackrabbits. So we have white-tailed jackrabbits in Minnesota, or had quite the population back at that time. And I chased them with female red-tailed hawks. And I caught, the biggest one I've ever caught of any of my birds was just over 12 pounds. And that was with a female red-tail. It was the only white-tailed jackrabbit I caught with her that year. And I spent the next year chasing jackrabbits with 2 different red-tails and got a lot of fur, but just couldn't put them in the bag. Our white-tails tails get very thick, very furry during winter time. So I said, okay, I need a bigger gun, basically. It's just, and I was only fist hawking, so I wasn't flying them from trees or from perches. It was strictly I wanted to do it off the fist. So I said, okay, I need a bigger gun. I need to move up, and I couldn't get an eagle at that time. I was just brand new into my general.
Right.
So I said, I'm going to get a Phrygianus hawk, and I'm gonna do that. So I pulled a 16-day-old female Phrygianus hawk in Wyoming, raised her up. I ended up flying her for 5 years, strictly off the fist. She was a great bird, caught quite a few jackrabbits for me. She did better on blacktails than whitetails, just the size differential. But we did catch a good number of whitetails over the years. But it was basically, that's what brought me to eagles was, okay, I need something that's better suited to handle jackrabbits on a day in, day out basis. And really that a male golden eagle is,
it's hard to beat for that.
Is my opinion, is the best birds hands down in North America. I mean, you don't need to assist them in any way, shape, or form. When they get a hold of a rabbit, that's it. It's done. So that's what brought me to eagles, and I started to get really interested about that 2002, 2003 time frame. So 2004, I went to the first eagle meet. I researched everybody who was going to be there, all the birds that they had, and I at the time I was probably 20 or so at that time when I went out to the eagle meet. And I was still a few years away from even being able to think about applying for an eagle. 23 was the age you had to be to apply. If you started and you upgrade to a general and you're 18 and you do 5 years as a general, you can become a master at 23.
Right, yeah.
So I did that when I turned 23. I applied to be upgraded. Got upgraded within a couple days of getting my upgraded master permit. I sent in, at that time we had a federal eagle permit that you had to apply for. So I sent in my master permit copy and all the things that you needed to apply for that permit. So within 3 weeks of upgrading to a master, I had my federal eagle permit.
And did you have to have like the letters of recommendation and stuff like that from like a few different people and saying that you are competent at handling big birds and things like that too?
Yes, you did. And the way it worked back then was you had to put all your large raptor experience, but you needed 2 letters of recommendation from people who had experience handling eagles.
Okay, specifically.
Yeah,
okay.
And I had spent a few years, so it was fall of 2007 when I got my eagle permit. So I had spent from 2004 to 2007 basically finding anybody who had flown an eagle, trying to get out hawking with them, traveling all over the United States. I mean, if they were hawking somewhere, I drove out there and hawked with them. And I met lots of people. I went international to see eagle falconry in 2007. So I did everything I could to absorb everything eagle, see it in the field, see the hawking happen, that way. So I had a really good basis. I knew a lot of people, so when it came time for those 2 letters, it was easy for me to ask. They had seen me fly my bird, my Phrygianus, in the field, so they kind of knew, okay, he at least knows how to fly a bird. We've seen him fly and kill stuff rather than
not just a bird, but a larger bird.
Yes,
even larger than like a red tail or whatever.
Yeah. So the letters were, honestly, it was really easy for me, and I sent in 3 letters just to go above and beyond and try to make sure, like, hey, give me my permit really quickly, please.
Right.
So they did have that at that time. It's basically the same way it is now. It just required eagle handling experience rather than just large raptor experience.
Gotcha.
Hey everyone, I'll make this short, but I just want to cut in real quick and say thank you to all the people that have been kind enough to buy the patches that we just debuted recently. The proceeds from that, as well as the sponsorship from Marshall, has gone a long way towards solidifying our ability to keep bringing these episodes to you all and pay for our fees associated with bringing the podcast to all the different platforms. So thank you all again so much. It's been really nice and actually pretty humbling seeing all the orders from all over the world. So thank you again so much, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Chase so we can keep hearing about his path towards eagle falconry and the things that came after. So let's get back to it.
It's been interesting, like hearing your kind of slightly different perspective. So, usually if someone wants to get into a specific type of bird, it's because they think that bird is cool, not because what they want to kill with it is cool. And they want to,
Yes.
and that's how they, want to make their focus is, they have a favorite type of prey, so they want to get this bird. It's like a secondary, or like a kind of a little like subtext, or just kind of a secondary way of approaching it. It seems like it's different. So it's kind of, it's definitely different. I mean, you always hear about someone just being fascinated with specific type of raptor or whatever, and they just, it's not even so much about the prey when it's really what it should be. I mean,
Yeah.
technically, because I mean, if you don't obviously have that prey, you shouldn't get that type of bird. So, et cetera, so on and so forth. But, I mean, whenever you were going all these different places, then, I mean, you touched on a couple of those, where, I mean, did you end up pretty much like all over the country or just specific areas? I mean, obviously I'm sure you were probably going more out west and stuff, right? Because that's where you're going to find most of your jackrabbits and
Yes.
things like that. But I mean, where was the first eagle meet? Where was that held?
So the first ever eagle meet, 2004, was held in, technically it was Jeffrey City, Wyoming. Well, Lander was, I guess, technically the city, which is a much bigger city, but Jeffrey City is a small little kind of rolled up mining town. And that's where everybody basically based out of, was Jeffrey City. So I drove out there having met nobody, that was going to be there. I didn't know a single soul, and drove out there and I'd done a lot of research on them. So I knew kind of who was who and what birds they were flying. Did that meet. It was great from an informational meeting people standpoint, horrible from an actual hawking knowledge standpoint. I think we could probably count on one hand how many jackrabbits we saw during daylight hours that whole week.
That sounds really familiar.
Yes, it does.
Sounds kind of like deja vu almost.
Exactly. And the couple birds that were there, some were still in training. There was one bird that was doing well, chasing jackrabbits at night. But I did not gain a whole lot from the hunting standpoint other than a social networking. And I traveled in 2005. They had the eagle meet in conjunction with the NAFA meet in Vernal, Utah, 2005. Okay. So I traveled there because I go to the NAFA meets anyway, and did not see any eagle hawking there. Just the area was not the right country to be trying to fly an eagle if you were going to have any success on off the fist hawking. So that was kind of a failure, but the bright side was I did get to meet Joe Atkinson, who's a very good friend of mine and arguably one of the most successful, if not the most successful eagle falconer that the United States has ever seen. He's flown a lot of birds, he's killed a lot of jackrabbits, done a lot of rehab work with Goldens. So I met him and talked to him a little bit, which gave me an in, and I called him up the next summer. I convinced the IEAA, International Eagle Astrologers Association, our North American basically eagle meet, hey, the last two meets weren't that great. Why don't you let me host the next one, and I will do it in Kansas. So I hosted it in 2006, and I called Joe up and I said, hey, I know a place where there's a lot of jackrabbits. I want you to come to the meet because I want to learn, how you do this with your eagle. I want to basically see everything you do successfully catching, trade-offs, how you manage the weight, how you manage, aggression, anything. And that really does wonders when you can tell somebody, hey, please come hawk all the jackrabbits that I found.
Well, yeah, it really is truly amazing how quickly you become important to falconers whenever you suddenly have these magical fields.
Yes, and that was exactly how it went. And and Joe didn't know me from anybody else, but we talked quite a bit on the phone, and I got him. He'd come out, and we're, like I said, very good friends now. But I think I probably annoyed the heck out of him that first year. I basically crawled in his back pocket. I mean, every time his bird caught a jackrabbit, can I walk up to kill with you? I'd stand behind him. I'd watch what he'd do, and I mean, he would tell me where to stand or what to do. But I wanted to see, how are successful people doing this? How are they doing the trade-off? What kind of flights are they taking? What kind of cover are they working? How is the wind working? Everything, and I recommend this to everybody I talk to with any species of raptor. Like, if somebody asks me, I really want to fly a goshawk, what should I do? Find a guy who's really good with goshawks and follow him around as much as you can.
As much as they'll tolerate.
Yeah, as much as they'll let you do it. And so I developed a network. Basically, I met all the eagle guys throughout the United States, at least all the ones who ever went to meets. I met a lot of them. I'm still good friends with quite a few of them across the country. And that was kind of my learning process of eagles a couple years before I could even get an eagle, was just following guys around who were being really successful.
Did he ever really do anything to kind of mess with you a little bit when he was trying to show you the ropes a little bit? I mean, obviously he wasn't going to do anything that was going to get you hurt. Yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how your relationship was with him. But maybe by that time he was about ready to tell you to go and just reach in there barehanded and try. But he was so tired of dealing with you. But
Yeah. No. He was actually really good with that. And like I said, I'm good friends with Joe and his wife Cordy. And they basically, for lack of a better term, adopted me at that time. I'm the same age as their two daughters, so they basically adopted me. So they were pretty good about that. So no practical jokes or real pranks or anything that way. But I did have, he was very influential in helping me out with that. Another Eagle Falconer who was very influential was Jim Rogers, who's out of New Mexico.
Okay.
And being a young kid, in your early 20s, really wanting to get into eagles, I was very interested in doing things, and Jim was great about wanting to encourage that, and he had a bird at the time, Zoltar, male golden eagle. He was flying.
It's a good name.
Yeah, and they had an event that they were doing where it's kind of a meet and greet at the 2005 vernal meet, and he's like, I don't want to hold this bird for 2 hours, I don't want to do it. If you want to, you can hold him. And so he let me hold the bird, and I went back to his hotel room, and I fed the bird on the glove that night. And I'm sure it's because he's where I am now. He's like, man, this is a chore. I don't want to do this. This guy will do it for free. Sure, I'll let him do it.
Yeah, let his arm fall off.
Yeah, and I thought it was, as with anything, first time you ever pick up a red tail, it's the greatest thing in the world when you feed a red tail for the first time. Same thing, feeding golden eagle was such a memorable experience. So there were a few people, and Jim was one of them, that really pushed me and allowed me to do things and gain some hands-on experience, which was, for me, was really helpful and really cool, because there were a lot of other people in the eagle community that were the opposite direction of, I'm the only one who can do this because I'm the only one who's qualified. You're not nearly experienced enough. So there were some on that side, and there were some who were really helpful, like Joe and Jim were. So I'm very appreciative of them.
Which you'll find about, for about every species, for every type of bird, for every type of falconry.
Yes. And I've always embraced more the other side of it of, if somebody's interested and they want to learn, I'll talk to anybody. I'll help out as much as I can.
You obviously had to learn from somewhere, and you don't want to keep fostering more generations of people. It doesn't not even just necessarily falconry, but what good does it do to foster in future generations of people who don't know how to do something right or properly, or be as well equipped to do it?
Yeah.
If you love what you're doing, or at least have enough respect for what you're doing, you'll want to try your best to make sure that the people that are going to be doing it after you're long gone are going to be doing the same things, or maybe even like learning well enough to the point where they can, develop it even further, or, broaden it even more, or, come up with some kind of new innovation that, nobody's seen before, or whatever. It's a better legacy to leave behind than being that guy that's just going to teach somebody wrong just because they want to teach somebody wrong or don't know any better or whatever.
Well, and I think, I was told specifically when I was getting into eagle falconry, I did have somebody pull me aside and say, well, there's a reason, most of us wait till we're older to do this, because it's very expensive. It's very time consuming to be an eagle falconer, and you probably should wait till you're, over 50 before you get into eagle falconry. And I thought, well, that's nuts. I'm not doing that. But the elitism thing, and it's there with all falconry. There's nothing, to be honest, that complicated about falconry. It's a pretty simple sport. We're not training a whole lot. It just takes a lot of dedication and time, and being able to read a bird. And when you start to see falconry from different parts of the world, I learned a lot, when I was in the Middle East. Falconry is a very community-orientated event. It's not, this is my bird, hands off, stay away from it, mine. Over there, I mean, you can walk in and pick up any falcon, and just look at it and start examining it. It's just part of their culture, and it was really neat. I mean, at their event and festival, you could walk in off the street and be just anybody. And here, have a white gyrfalcon. Here, hold on to this bird for a few minutes. Take pictures. Do whatever. And then obviously they would take it back. There was a falconer there, but it was very much sharing and giving. It was more of a community thing than the U.S. in general looks at birds of don't touch it, it's mine, kind of a thing.
Right. So, I mean that's an interesting point to bring up. How much different cultures and different countries in general just view dealing with birds of prey and falconry in general. And some. Some of the Austrian and German falconers and stuff that I've kind of gotten to know a little bit from my trips over there a couple times. It's kind of interesting seeing how it's viewed more of just kind of like you were just describing with the Middle East. More of the cultural heritage aspect of things, and sometimes not that they completely don't hunt, but obviously it's meant like more the tradition and culture aspect of it is kind of almost more the focus than us, which is primarily the hunting side.
Yes.
So I mean, and you mentioned also your ties to your friend in Scotland and everything else. Kind of expound on that a little bit with how you kind of got into the co-op deal and everything else, and how that works a little bit, because I'm completely ignorant to that. I mean, you hear bits and pieces from people, but I mean, I don't know anything about that. So.
You are correct. There's a lot of tidbits of information floating around out there, but it's a fairly complex system, and not a lot of people who are outside of the system really know the ins and outs. So to kind of give you a little bit of a background to that, martial eagles have always been, you talked about species of birds people like, for whatever reason, martial eagles have always been the one species of bird that I've always wanted to work with. I saw a picture of them. I thought they were stunning. That was kind of my dream species. And I tried to figure out how to get my hands on some ever since the time I was 18, which pretty much does not happen unless you know the right people and go through the right channels. So over the years, I've been blessed to be able to meet a lot of very influential falconers from around the world, and I'm good friends with a falconer, Andrew Knowles Brown from Scotland, and he's arguably probably the most competent eagle breeder. He's bred more species of eagles than I would think anybody else on earth. He has tons of different species that he propagates in Scotland because he loves eagles and conservation. And we've become really good friends over hawking. He would come to the United States and hunt over here at the eagle meets, come out with us flying our golden eagles here.
That's cool.
And we built that friendship over time, and I've spent time with him in the UK at the Opochno meet, and I've also spent time with him in the UAE, so we spent 3 weeks over there. So all this time, I've known him for about 12 years now. We've become, like I said, very good friends. He produces some eagles, and he knew how much I wanted martial eagles. So when he produced martial eagles, I was able to talk him into allowing me to import some into our cooperative breeding program. Mm-hmm. So to expound on that, the cooperative breeding program, there's two main ones that I know of. There may be more, but there's a Washington program. The other program is run by Dave Canales out of Nevada, a very dedicated falconer who wants to see these species worked with in America before it's too late.
I got to meet and hang with Dave the past couple nights for the first time, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. I mean, he really has a vision of wanting to see these species come in and be worked with by falconers, because he sees the same thing that I do, that if we don't do it now, they're going to be lost to America. Mm-hmm. And he's done a lot of work in taking a co-op that was running. So what a co-op is a cooperative breeding program that the government says, okay, we recognize you as a breeding program, that you're trying to work with X species of birds to keep the bloodline alive if we ever need this bloodline for either reintroduction or captive breeding purposes. So I don't know the whole history. I don't know what falconers put in all the work, but somebody put in a lot of work to get this thing started a long time ago. Dave runs and facilitates the cooperative, and he's the one who added the different species of eagles. He added crowned eagles into it. African hawk eagles, Benelli's eagles. I asked if he could add Marshall eagles, which he did. So my birds that I have 3 male African Marshall eagles. They're all captive bred from 2 breeders in Scotland. 2 of them are from Andrew. Another one is from Barry. I imported them through Dave's co-op. So with Dave's blessing, we brought them in, and our goal is to breed them and propagate them. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife will not allow you to bring in any exotic species of birds at all unless it's through a cooperative breeding program or through a pet loophole. If you live outside the United States for 12 consecutive months, you are allowed to bring 2 pets back into the United States. So those pets can be anything that you want. You can bring back 2 of any raptor that's legal.
Go out and get you a harpy eagle and just bring it on back with you.
Possibly. I would have to look into. The only exclusion to that is if it's a CITES 1, if it's Appendix 1 in CITES. So if it's Appendix 2, you can bring anything in. So basically, if it's not endangered, you can bring it in.
Gotcha.
So part of the cooperative breeding program, I joined, with the intention of breeding these birds. So I don't know how far to go into this. So I bought the birds. They're mine, but they are part of the cooperative breeding program. I can never sell these birds outside of the cooperative breeding program. I can't give them away to anybody. They're basically property in the breeding program, and that's their main point and purpose, is to be bred in captivity, which I'm currently waiting for females to become available. First on the list with both breeders that I know over there. So once females become available, I'll hopefully be able to import those and pair up these males so that we don't lose the species in North America.
Huh. Well, that's very, very interesting to me how that all works, because like I said, you have to have that drive for sure to want to make that happen, because that sounds extremely complex and complicated, and I know that you're just and it's totally fine just for the purpose of our discussion. I mean, I wouldn't expect you to go into all the legal jargon and everything else that goes in behind it by any stretch, but that's already way more than I knew before our talk. So that's, I don't know. It's mind-blowing to me probably how much work actually really goes into that.
There is the amount of red tape and paperwork. I mean, once you understand it, it's not as scary once you've been through the process once or twice. But it's very intimidating looking at the process to begin with. And there's a lot of paperwork required on both sides. U.S. Fish and Wildlife permits, USDA permits, inspections, brokers, all the forms coming from whatever country you're importing from, arranging all the flights, quarantine, getting birds out of quarantine. And it's a pretty long process. When I brought, and I say I didn't do most of the work. I got everything together, but Dave did a bulk of the heavy lifting in filing all the permits and everything. So when we did that, I believe it was almost a year from the time we started the kind of, hey, let's add this species and bring these birds into the time that they actually came in was about a year.
Wow.
It's been a little quicker. The last import that I worked and helped out with, I brought a bird in for myself, again, with all of Dave's help, him doing all the paperwork. And I helped another falconer that was part of the co-op bring a bird in from the same breeder. I was kind of the liaison because I knew everybody on the European side. We did it a little bit quicker than that, but it still was a good, 8-month process to get everything through, get all the permits, paperwork. Then you have 30 days of quarantine. So it's very expensive.
You're making my head spin right now.
It is very expensive. It's a very long-term road, but if you want to see a particular species in America, it's the only option. Nothing is coming out of the wild out of Africa anymore. I mean, really, nothing's coming out of the wild for most places anymore. So we're hoping to use contacts in other countries that are captive breeding to be able to bring some of these birds in.
Well, so like your buddy in Scotland and stuff. Then, if that's the case, I mean, how did he get his birds then?
So
a similar process, or
he did all his breeding stock right now, or at least a majority of it is wild caught birds, wild taken birds that came out of Africa for the species that he works with, for the focus of this discussion. But he had a broker who met with the trappers in Africa, who would pick out which specific birds he wants, and basically export them out of Africa, and he would bring them into Europe with all the correct paperwork. That has since been shut down in Europe. Nothing's coming out of Africa anymore into Europe. They found that pretty much it wasn't legally coming out of Africa. It just, there were officials that were stamping things saying that it was legal and willing to export it, but by their government. So that was shut down a few years ago. So Andrew was smart enough to have the forethought to say, this is going to end. I better bring a bunch of birds in. And he brought Benelli's, African hawk eagles, Varro's eagles, also known as a black eagle, Marshall eagles, and crowned eagles in, and has successfully bred Benelli's, African hawk eagles, crowned eagles, and Marshall eagles.
Wow. Jeez.
So it's kind of our turn in America, in that if we ever want to see this species here in the future, you have to bring it in now. You have to be willing to invest the time and the money, and go through captive breeders to bring it in. I just want to see Marshall eagles here. When my day comes and I'm no longer around, I hope there is somebody who's picked up the torch where I've left off, and can continue breeding them and maybe bring in some new bloodlines to at least for falconers to be able to see them in the future in person.
Well, and hopefully by then too, we'll still have habitat and everything else in the prey species too.
That is true.
It's really sad how much we're losing every year.
We are. I mean, jackrabbits, which is my main thing, in my opinion, have been declining across the western United States for quite a few years now. It's been especially visible to me over the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of the places that used to have lots and lots and lots of rabbits are now devoid. I gave up hawking most whitetail jacks in Minnesota years ago, because we had huge populations on the North Dakota Minnesota border, and they were just gone. Our farming practices, it's jokingly called the Black Desert up there, because it's nothing but black fields. They turn everything over in the fall, and it's just black fields as far as you can see. There's no food, there's no cover. So we lost a lot of our jackrabbit populations, and I'm seeing that a lot in western Kansas, parts of Texas, Wyoming, and there are cycles, but I think that in my limited experience and not being a scientist, there's something bigger at play, whether it's our farming practices, whether it's our what we're using chemical wise, habitat destruction. I don't know what it is, but
all of the above.
Yeah. they are definitely getting harder and harder, and I'm fortunate. I travel a lot for my hawking. So,
yeah. Well, and you do abatement too, right?
I do, yeah. So I fly birds. I try to do most of my work. My busy season is spring through mid to late summer, and then I'm pretty much off through the fall and winter. I do have a couple of my people who work for me. I keep them busy, or I try to keep them busy doing work in the wintertime. But that allows me to travel and do things. If I work a lot in the spring and summer, then I can kind of take the fall and winter and go travel.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few different buddies that do abatement as well, and part of me envies being able to do that, and the other part of me doesn't envy how busy they are during those times that they are busy. But
yeah,
I mean, what are most of your accounts? I mean, I know you mentioned to me earlier you do a lot of gull stuff, and I mean, what else do you primarily focus on with your abatement?
I do a little bit of everything, but my two big things are industrial and crops. So when I say crops, I mean cherries. Cherries is what I have specialized in since I got started. I've done some apple work. I've touched a little bit on blueberries, but really nothing, so to speak, on blueberries, but cherries are kind of my bread and butter. I know how to do those. And then I do industrial work ranging from I have oil refineries that I do. I have some independent businesses that have problems with gull nesting issues in the springtime, so we do work with them. I've done some work for the Department of Defense, state of Minnesota, catching pigeons in their helicopter hangars. Let's see. Other industrial work, I did a big job for a liquid natural gas facility, preventing nesting birds on development lands. So I pretty much am willing to look at anything that anybody's got going, and if I think I can do it, and have good results, I can do it. But I do split my time between industrial and crop work. Crops being summer, industrial generally being spring, and then a little bit of winter work.
About what part of your falconry career were you at that you realized that you could do that for a living, or is that something that you were always kind of aware that you could do? But I mean, when did you really find that was much more than just like a simple interest, maybe, that you want to do that for a living?
I had no clue about it early on in falconry, and it was, I would say, maybe 10 years ago now that I kind of started to hear a little bit more about it. And I worked corporate job, nothing spectacular, for a decent sized company in Minneapolis, and I just thought, I don't want to be behind this desk in 10 years trying to figure out how to spend my 3 weeks of vacation that I get. There has to be something more. I want more time. That's what I want, I want time to be able to go hunt more and do more cool things. So I started to look into the abatement stuff at that point in time. And I talked to a few people who were very influential in the industry. And both the people I talked to, I still consider very good friends. We talked quite a bit. I worked for a company, basically got my feet wet, knew I was going to probably do my own thing eventually. Just that was my goal. And that's what I did. But I looked at it and just said, hey, if I work hard and I'm willing to go on the road and I'm willing to put in working 7 days a week, long days, I can pretty much, make the equivalent of what I'm making at, my mid-level corporate job right now, but I could do it in 4 months of work versus year-round work. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't married, didn't have kids,
right.
And I pretty much, I was already running my own company breeding snakes at that time, and selling them all over the country. So I had that to fall back on too. If this whole abatement thing doesn't work out, I'm not completely high and dry. So I just, I researched it, learned a lot, talked to people, spent a year researching it, and then bit the bullet and jumped into it. And I can't say I regret it. It's worked out very well for me so far.
Well, I mean, it allows you to, travel around, like you said, and, hang out at meets and eventually find yourself back in a hotel room, doing a podcast with some bald dude you just met, like a couple days ago, and, let you,
it's the upside of NAFA meets.
Meet new people and have, cool new experiences and stuff, which unfortunately I hate the fact that like the rabbit situation here has been I would have loved to have seen or gotten a chance to go out with you and watch you fly your eagles and stuff, but it wasn't meant to be this time.
Not a lot of jackrabbits here. I knew that coming into it, so I was able to cope with it. But a lot of people have been out hawking with me over the years at NAFA meets. I usually have pretty big groups, 30 to 50 people in the field.
Well, naturally, everybody's going to gravitate towards eagles, So.
But I'm always happy. I tell you, just like I tell, I'll take anybody out hawking who wants to come hawking with me. I really, that's how I learned it. I followed guys around, and I want to return the favor and give people the opportunity to come see something. So I wish I could do it here. I don't think it's going to happen at this meet, just with the low amount or non-existent amount of jackrabbits here. But at the next NAFA meet in Kearney, I will be taking people out. I do have a friend who hooks me up with a couple fields, so I take people out up there. And if you want to travel a little more, the THA meet, Texas Hawking meet, is happening January 15th to January 20th.
Yeah, Lauren invited me to that also, and unfortunately, I'm going to be out in Anaheim, living my music, false rock star lifestyle for about a week, during that time. So
that's a good excuse for not being there. Like I totally get that.
Yeah, I'll be out there at the NAMM Music Convention, the big music merchant convention thing that happens every year. I help endorse the bass guitar company that I endorse with their booth and stuff, usually each year out there. So nice. Unfortunately, I will have to be out there hanging, with my prominent musician buddies and kind of being, occasionally wined and dined out there instead of
Sounds terrible.
watching the eagles fly. So we'll have to make it happen another time, but I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So you have a standing invite to come hawking with me anytime I'm out hawking.
Well, fantastic, man. It's been so awesome getting to know you a little bit and everything, and hanging out, and thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time tonight.
Oh yeah,
really appreciate
you're
it, man.
more than welcome. That's what NAFA meets are for, is having fun and catching up with people. So I appreciate. I'm glad you thought I was worthy to be a guest on your podcast, and I'd be happy to do it anytime. Yeah,
we try and keep a motto. It's like nobody's too unimportant, and nobody's too famous, not famous, whatever. Everybody's got a story, and I'm glad that I got to hear yours and share it with everybody else.
Well, I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.